Welcome to Season 2 of the Cryptopulse podcast, your ultimate guide to the world of crypto, Bitcoin, and world economics. We're here to guide you through the crypto universe with thought-provoking topics, in-depth knowledge, and information to help you make informed decisions. We'll also be interviewing some of the best minds in the industry, such as CEOs of crypto projects, traders, economists, authors, and development teams from around the globe. And now for the episode.
Crypto Damus, welcome to Cryptopulse. We're very excited to have you on. Both Ben and I have been following your work for a little while now. And this is going to be quite a different episode. So if you're listening, keep an open mind. So maybe you want to just quickly introduce yourself, first of all.
Hi, folks. Yeah, thanks for having me here. I know we've been a while trying to get this to happen. So I'm really happy to be here on the podcast today. And I'm Crypto Damus, Astro Crypto Guru on Twitter, and I use financial astrology in combination with traditional technical analysis and other types of traditional market analysis. But we think that financial astrology component gives us a little extra edge, and it gives us a bit more of a predictive quality to our analysis and of the markets, especially for crypto. I'm one of the main, financial astrologers who just really focus on cryptocurrencies primarily. I mean, I do some for stocks and gold and sometimes for other markets, but mainly I'm really focused on Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies. And I have the longest running subscription report service for financial astrology that's just for crypto. I think that, it's been a valuable tool, and I think it's something that could really benefit people. I think it has some really interesting information specifically about what's going on right now for crypto and how long this bear market's going to last. Hopefully we'll share some of that info with you a little bit later.
I think it was JP Morgan that once famously said that millionaires don't need astrologers, but billionaires do.
Right. That's the famous quote. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a hell of a line. And I'd love to, just for the purpose of our listeners, just to ask you, what is it about astrology that provides, how does it provide information? Because that's one of the questions we get asked a lot is, how does it work? How do you create a chart? How do you make predictions about anything that's up and coming?
Mm. Oh, and why is it true? Because I might be a bit cynical.
First of all, that's a lot right there.
Yeah.
Those are a lot. Those are some big questions. Okay. Yeah. Basically, what we do is, first of all, anything that has like a birthday, right? Anything that has a birthday or what we would call an inception, if it's a person, we call it a birthday. If it's an event or a thing, that has an inception day, anything that has a start day or start time can, to some degree, be predicted by astrology, right? Astrology can bring some information to the table. That could be for an IPO. You could do an IPO chart. For Bitcoin, particularly, we use the Genesis block as the inception, time for Bitcoin, the very first block on the blockchain, the zero block, the Genesis block. It's January 3rd. I think everybody who's really into Bitcoin knows it's January 3rd, 2009. I think it was 6:15 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time. We don't have a location, which is a slight problem because we need a location to run a chart. Like if you have astrology software, you need a location, right, to run a chart. The most commonly used chart is the London chart because there's that little bit from the Financial Times of London that was encoded into the Genesis block. And so a lot of people have, said that Satoshi Nakamoto is British, but really nobody knows. It's still one of the great mysteries of the 21st century is who is Satoshi Nakamoto, right? And since we don't know who he is and we don't know where Bitcoin was created, it's a guess. There are several guesses, but London is the most commonly used chart, and I have been studying it over the years. I think it is probably the most likely location based on the astrological analysis. So once we have an inception chart, we use that. We look at what we call transits and progressions, right? How the planets in real time are interacting with that birth chart, the natal chart of Bitcoin itself. We kind of look at Bitcoin like it's a person, or maybe it's an AI. I mean, I don't know what it is, but it doesn't really matter. It has a personality, right? And that's described by the chart. And the transits to the Bitcoin chart have a predictive value. However, we also have to correlate those with kind of the general astrology picture, right? So, for example, right now, Jupiter is in Pisces for the third time again. And every time that Jupiter has gone into Pisces, it's been terrible for Bitcoin. We had that from the middle of May 2021 through the end of July 2021, right? Okay, I think we all remember that period as not being very good for Bitcoin. And then as soon as Jupiter went out of Pisces, Bitcoin rallied again. And then recently it just went into Pisces again on October 28th, right before the FTX crisis, and you had another big dump. So that's just a general factor that seems to be really unfavorable. So we also have to look at the general astrological factors that are in the sky, right? So we're correlating Bitcoin specific information together with general astrology information. And by looking at both of those things, we put together a forecast picture. But that's just another component, right? So in my system, we just add, let's say that's just another technical indicator, right? That can have predictive value. It had a great predictive value. In July of 2021, I was able to predict very accurately that the end of that summer slump, and that Bitcoin would turn around and it would rally all the way into October, right? And I told people, you can go back, this is all, you asked me, how do we know it works? How can we prove it? I don't know that we'll ever really be able to prove it, but you can go back to my subscription reports. You can go back to my Twitter timeline. You can see I told people to take profits several times in November and December. And I said, this bear market is coming next year. Now, did I know how bad it was going to be? No, not exactly at the time. But I did warn people. I did tell people to take profits and preserve capital. So, it's a very complex system, as a lot of technical analysis is. We're just throwing that astrology component in, and it's a complex component. But price is king, right? Not only do we look to the stars, guys, we also look to the Fed. Okay, the Fed may be even more important than the stars, right? It's like we're not just only looking at astrology. Like Fed policy, are they raising rates? Are they, the Fed pivot? We look at other factors of like what's going on to understand the larger context of the market.
When was the birth date of the Fed?
I don't know off the top of my head. I think it's somewhere in 1911, 1912, something like that.
Yeah. So why, civilizations from thousands of years ago used astrology, and I was in Mexico a few months back, and I know a lot of Mayan traditions surround astrology and moon phases and things, and I always say now we're in an era of left brain thinking, and back then it was more right brain led. And I think the greatest wisdom comes from both. But why is astrology a thing, and how does it work, and how does it help you predict markets? Because I'm sure that's what our listeners are thinking.
Well, going all the way back to ancient, Babylonian times is really the origin of astrology. I think the heyday of astrology, was in the Greek and Roman times, the Hellenistic periods, the Athens in the 5th century, kind of stuff like that. Astrology is the study of like the movement of the planets, and the symbolic meanings, of the planets and their influence or their effect or their correlation to events, on Earth. Whether it's personal or collective. And there's many different, schools of astrology, right? There's like Jungian psychological astrology, which is much more about kind of developing a psychological profile of someone and their internal motives for doing things, versus, say, something like traditional Hellenistic astrology, which is a little bit more deterministic and concrete, kind of event-based. There's many different systems of astrology, but basically astrology is the study of the motion and the movements of the planets and their correlation to events in our personal lives and news events, global world events, that spans across, politics, culture, economics, financial markets, many, many different things. Astrology, I think, is really, it's really like a kind of a very profound like language. It's an international language that people from all over the world who, from different countries and different cultures and may not have a common language in common, we can still study and talk about astrology together. It's quite fascinating, right? So it's kind of a universal language of archetypal symbolic truth, right? And when I say that, I mean, Venus is the goddess of love, Mars is the god of war, conflict, but also confidence, asserting your needs, putting yourself out there in the world. Venus is kind of all the good things in life, money, wealth, sex, relationships, love, all of the good things in life, the finer things in life, good food and good wine and Rolex watches and, that kind of stuff like that. Now, why? Those are really complex questions. Why is Venus the god of love? It's really through empirical observation over millennium that these kind of systems came together. Now, how does it work? Why does it work? Those are very, those questions you get into the realm of mysticism and spirituality, right? I mean, I don't necessarily know exactly, how it works other than, as above, so below, right? I mean, everything is connected. The Buddhist teachings are that everything is interconnected in very, very subtle ways. But the thing about astrology that I tell people is it's not a belief system. Like you don't have to have faith. It's not like having faith in Jesus Christ, and no knock against Jesus Christ. It's not a belief system. It's based on the empirical observation of the planetary influences, and you can correlate data and back test some of these theories. You will see, if you study astrology over a period of time, you will see that Mars does indeed bring conflicts and war. Venus does indeed bring love and relationships. So these things can be observed over time through the study of astrology. I mean, most people who say they don't believe in astrology haven't spent more than 5 minutes really studying, the system. Now, how, again, these are complex questions. Why is it predictive? How does it predict things? Well, I've shown over and over again by using the Bitcoin natal chart that it is predictive. It predicted the collapse of Mt. Gox. It predicted the bear market from 2014 to 2015. It predicted, the rally in December of 2017. It predicted the 2018 bear market. Now, the short-term fluctuations, of course, are going to be a little bit more hit or miss. It predicted, certainly a huge historic rally in October of 2021. And then again, it predicted that 2022 would be a difficult year. Now, how difficult? I have to say I was a bit surprised. There's always going to be some factors that are going to be wait and see. We can't always predict every factor. Let's face it, predicting the future is hard. No matter what, technique you're using, predicting markets is hard, right? If it was easy, we'd all be billionaires. It's hard. What we're trying to do is get any edge, right? If you're a trader, all you need is 51%, right? You just need that 1% odds in your favor, and that plays out over 1,000 trades. You're going to be a profitable trader, just like the casino. We'll take more than 1% if we can get it, but we're just looking for an edge. It doesn't mean we always know what's happening next, but I think it gives us some broad outlines of market trends, especially for cryptocurrencies. Now, stock markets are a lot more complex. You're talking about like many different indices all over the world with tens of thousands of different companies affected by so many different types of global forces, right? So stock markets, I think, are much harder to predict. Cryptocurrency markets, because the entire market goes up and down, essentially with Bitcoin, we have a little bit more of a kind of, it's just a slightly less complexity there. I don't know if I answered your questions, but I tried my best.
That was a very good set of answers, I think.
One of the things which I know that you spoke about then is back testing some of these observations. And when we're talking about global events and things like war, there's so much data that you can correlate to the planetary alignments, and you can go and back test for tens of thousands of years. Now, Bitcoin is a relatively modern idea, and it hasn't been around for particularly long. Does that make your job much more difficult? Are you still collecting evidence? Are you still figuring out how this thing works?
Sure. Well, that's actually, that's a good point. I mean, that's a place where we're kind of at a disadvantage with cryptocurrencies because we only have like basically 13 years of data or whatever it is. I mean, and even not even that, right? Because I mean, Bitcoin wasn't very widely traded for those first few years. So let's just say there's like something like 10 years of data, whereas stock markets, you can go all the way back, over 100 years. So at least you have that. Now, it's interesting. I mean, backtesting doesn't always work either because, every year is different. I mean, I think this has been one of the most anomalous years. I mean, for markets, certainly in this century, but even going back, you have to go back 50, 60, 70 years to see markets acting some of the ways they are now, right? I mean, you've got inflation is at a 40-year high. The US dollar is at a 20-year high. Now, you never saw Bitcoin. I think it made 11 weeks down or 10 weeks straight down. So it's never did that before 2022. So we had no precedent for that. Even the S&P 500, I think, was down like 12 out of 13 weeks at one point. You have to go back to the 1970s to see anything even remotely close to that. So we saw a lot of weird things this year. For example, like Jupiter in Aries, I back tested extensively. It's always been bullish for the past 50 years. The last 4 cycle, it's a 12-year cycle. And this year it wasn't really. I mean, you did get the summer rally, which lasted for about 6 weeks, I think. So that was Jupiter in Aries. But like Jupiter entered Aries in mid-May, and I even talked to, some very famous financial astrologers with more experience than I have, and they were like, yeah, Jupiter in Aries is usually bullish. And it wasn't this year. Now, maybe there were other factors that interfered with that, but every year is different. Every year is unique. You can backtest, you can study alignments, and that sometimes gives you great information. But you also have to be, it's like the past, isn't always an accurate predictor of what happens in the future. So, astrology has its limitations too. I've never claimed that it's 100% perfect at predicting the future, but hey, it's been better than like what was that model last year? The stock to flow model. I mean, okay, that kind of went out the window. Nobody's following that anymore. Whereas my predictions have actually continued to be quite accurate this year.
I mean, I think we're at the point now where all of the models for Bitcoin have been completely broken. I actually saw something wild on Twitter. There's the rainbow model, which was being peddled for some time, which has obviously got a set amount of colors, but they added another color just to make the model fit for a few more weeks.
Or make the rainbow thicker.
Just make the rainbow a little bit thicker.
I mean, like the only model I seem to have now is that the fiat system will come to an end as we know it at some point, and what that is replaced with, who knows? I'd like it to be a global Bitcoin standard, but just a dollar cost average into BTC at these low prices and have a decade plus time frame is like my kind of like novice approach to it. And I think I tweeted you back actually. You were saying, no, I'm going to stick to my model. Thanks. It's definitely going lower, and it did. But will I be pleased in 10 years that I bought Bitcoin at 18K and rather than 16? Yeah, that's fine. So I guess it depends on whether you're trading or hodling, right?
Sure. I mean, on the other hand there, if you did DCA at 18 and it goes down to 10, that's painful, right? That hurts. Yeah. So you've got to make it through that pain. I mean, the markets are, whatever strategy you're going to use is going to have its limitations. I have been telling people, I actually have been saying that DCA small amounts under 20K is okay. I think it's okay. Like you said, with a long time horizon of 5 to 10 years. However, what the Astro TA system has been saying, and I was on a BitBoy podcast a couple of weeks back before FTX and said exactly the same thing, was on Wendy O's podcast, said exactly the same thing. This was already a month ago. The Astro TA system is predicting major problems ahead still. Just in the short term, we're looking at a potential crisis, just even November 28th through December 1st. That's a period that I'm really worried about. This might be, I don't know if the podcast comes out after that, but then
I think it does. Yeah.
Okay. So forget that. Okay. Well, then they can see if I was right. They'll know if this guy's a loser. Oh man, prediction not coming true already. Then the next crisis is about right around December 25th. And I've been saying, hey, buy your Christmas presents early because we may have another Christmas wipeout over the holidays. December 25th through January 10th is another period astrologically I'm very worried about. We have a double unfavorable signal that overlaps. And the holidays, liquidity can be quite thin. So I'm very concerned about that. But the really big story astrologically comes in March and April. I see and I've done a lot of research on this. In fact, I presented this at one of the biggest astrological conferences, or the biggest one in the United States, in August in Denver, Colorado, the International Society for Astrological Research Conference. You can actually go to their website and purchase my talk if you want to hear it. But I gave a whole talk on March, or not a whole talk, but the conclusion was all about March and April. And I've done a lot of research in this. Bitcoin and Ethereum both astrologically have very stressful transits to their natal charts. And then also what I did was I looked at Michael Saylor's chart. And he's got some really big problems. So we see it showing up in Michael Saylor's chart. Also the Coinbase IPO chart, which I actually timed myself almost down to the minute of that IPO, also looks pretty bad. That takes a big hit as well. So we're seeing this show up. Now, Vitalik also maybe could be affected by this as well. So I'm seeing a lot of things showing up in March and April. And we've got two big planetary ingresses where these both Saturn and Pluto are going to change signs in March. Saturn will go into Pisces, which is about a once in every Saturn changes signs every 2.5 years. So the last time was in December 2020 into Aquarius together with Jupiter. And that was very favorable for cryptocurrencies. Aquarius generally tends to be a good sign for crypto. But Saturn's going to go into Pisces, and that's bad for Bitcoin for a variety of reasons. I won't go into the details, but it's not good for Bitcoin, the initial ingress. The even bigger story is Pluto transitioning into Aquarius. And Pluto only changes signs every 14 to 15 years. 15 to 20 years. It will spend 20 years in Aquarius. But it's going to take until the end of 2024. It's going to crisscross back and forth between Capricorn and Aquarius. And this is also because Bitcoin's natal Jupiter is at 29 Capricorn, Pluto is going to hit the Bitcoin Pluto multiple times. Now, the last time we had a Pluto conjunction in the Bitcoin inception chart, I kid you not, was February and March of 2014. Okay, That was the Mt. Gox collapse.
Oh, I was just going to bring up the chart then, but I won't bother because I know you've told me what happened.
Yeah, so Bitcoin lost 90% of its value, and it almost died. However, it came back from the dead and regenerated. And the great thing about the Mt. Gox story, it was horrible for people who lost money, but the good thing about it was a new generation of much safer exchanges came out and transformed the crypto ecosystem into this whole alternative financial markets. Now, we just almost had like a Mt. Gox situation here, and that was based on the eclipses. So astrologically, what's really interesting about 2022 is the Luna, the crash and destruction of Luna that happened, that was on right around the April 29th eclipse. The destruction of FTX collapse was right around the November 8th eclipse. So the eclipses this year were like the key factors that really wrecked crypto. And I think that we're going to see one more of those in April.
So it could be further fallout from the FTX situation, that's just maybe not found its way out yet. It could just be further contagion in the market. Or do you think it could be something more regulatory, like the US, the SEC coming out with something?
Well, that's interesting because I just got I get the free newsletter from Masari Research, right? And I was just looking at that, and the first thing he has is our newsletter are gonna look at the post FTX regulatory situation. We're seeing a lot of articles about Gary Gensler, seeing a lot of calls in the news. Even before FTX, we were seeing a lot of talk about regulation. Of course, FBF was part of the whole regulation thing. He was trying to get favorable regulation for himself, right? And I know that BitBoy was basically had come out extremely against him and almost started a war against him. So that was going on even before the collapse of FTX. Now, I think that the collapse of FTX has made the fact that government regulators are going to come in very heavy-handed in Q1 and Q2 of next year. So I think that is a huge risk overhang for crypto that I'm extremely worried about. And also, there could be some other factors as well, like the contagion that maybe doesn't show up, just like the Luna contagion actually took 6 months for some of this stuff to go down. This is a classic kind of astrological thing. We don't know exactly what the circumstances will be. But what we do know is, and again, I'm not always right, and I don't claim to be all of my predictions always happen, but this is one of the worst alignments I've ever seen in the Bitcoin astrological history. So it's concerning enough that I'm telling my followers and subscribers, hey, let's just wait. Let's just wait and see what happens. I don't know what happens, but I'm probably not going to make any really large allocations into crypto until I know what is going on in March and April. Now, maybe I'm wrong and I missed this, a rally, and okay, I'm willing to take that risk. Given what I'm seeing astrologically, I'm willing to err on the side of missing the rally rather than at making some big allocations and then the market just continues down more.
Yeah, and I think it's also important in the context of everything else that's going on with the macro environment, right? I mean, even if you just take astrology out of the picture, we've still got the Fed that are trying to tackle, the inflation, which is running hot, and it doesn't seem to be coming down meaningfully yet. So I don't think that fight is over.
That's a good point. I mean, macro risk. Now, the FTX stuff has just introduced a whole other fundamental risk to crypto markets. But that's a great point. I mean, you've got the 40-year high inflation all across the globe, Europe, the UK, the US. The Fed is still raising rates, which is risk off. Yeah. US dollar still, even though it's come down a bit, it's still quite high. And a lot of people are predicting a recession, is going to happen, that the Fed. The big question for 2023 is, will the Fed be able to bring inflation down without crashing the economy, the global economy, the U.S. economy? And nobody knows the answer, but that's the big question. A lot of people are saying they don't have a very good track record for the soft landing because they usually over-tighten. By the time they've realized they've over-tightened, it's too late. And then there's there's COVID policy in China. There's a possible rail strike in the U.S. in December that's been in the headlines a bit.
You know what? There just seems to be, at the moment, the biggest amount of global shit that I've ever seen in my lifetime. I mean, it's absolutely incredible what's going on, and there just doesn't seem to be anything good.
I feel like we're living through a once in a generation catastrophe every other year now. It's just doesn't seem to be getting much better.
Well, a lot of this has to do with the Fed, right? And this is why I said we look to the Fed maybe even more than the stars, right? Quantitative easing, basically has been propping this whole thing up for 14 years since the crisis of 2008. And let's face it, guys, the crypto markets rallied based on easy money policies of the Fed. Everything did, and they're calling it the everything bubble. Now, quantitative easing is kind of at its end game. They doubled down during the pandemic, right? They bought another $5 trillion worth of troubled assets and treasuries, and now they've got $9 trillion on their balance sheet. They're trying to figure out how to reduce that. And that's pulling liquidity out of markets. So now they're doing this thing called quantitative tightening, which nobody's ever done before. And we have no idea how it's going to play out. So this game of monetary musical chairs is kind of coming to an endpoint. Now, astrologically, the interesting thing about that is that kind of all started in 2008 when Pluto entered Capricorn. And now Pluto is coming to the end of Capricorn, and it's like the end game of that strategy. So what are they going to do next? What is the Fed going to do next? They're really like I think Lynn Alden, who I follow on Twitter, has written a lot about this. Is like the Fed is they're in check. They're not in checkmate. They still have a couple moves, but like their moves are rapidly shrinking.
Yeah.
In terms of what they can do, because the debt is so high now that if they raise interest rates too high, like the government won't be able to
repay their own debt.
So this isn't like the 1980s where they just raised interest rates to like 15%. They can't do that, and so they have more limitation now. And this is all corresponding astrologically to Pluto moving into Aquarius, which is going to bring a whole new generation, a whole new era. And that's something I talk about in my 2023 forecast report. The previous time of Pluto in Aquarius is interesting. It was encompassed both the American and French revolutions and also the Industrial Revolution.
Wow.
And cryptocurrencies will certainly be involved because Aquarius is a sign of futuristic new technologies.
Did you just mention the fourth turning, Ben?
I did mention the fourth turning.
I was just going to say exactly the same thing.
Right, I thought you might.
Yeah.
I have a question because I feel like for the last, when did COVID hit? 2019? I feel like for the last 3 years it's been doom and gloom and there's been absolutely no good news. I'm hoping that you can tell us that beyond some of the stuff you're seeing for March and April, that there is some light at the end of the tunnel. I mean, are we ever going to enter into a phase of prosperity and happiness and peace ever again?
Well, are we talking crypto or just the world in general?
Well, I mean, just crypto, but more generally. I mean,
what do you mean? There's something other than crypto?
Yeah, there is apparently a whole world. Yeah,
crypto goes up, makes me happy.
No, not that I ever see it, but it does exist.
Yeah.
So one of the things we're in right now is this period of Uranus and Taurus. Okay. So the last time, Taurus represents like stability, right? And the status quo. It's also a sign of peace and prosperity. Uranus represents disruption of the status quo, disruption of stability. And that, that started in 2018, 2019. With the rise of Trump, politically turned everything upside down, the status quo, and then COVID hit, and it turned life on planet Earth completely upside down. Now, the last time Uranus was in Taurus was 1934 through 1941. Also a period of great upheaval, the Great Depression, the rise of fascism, political and economic upheaval. So I think there's some similarities to that period where there's just, I think as long as Uranus is in Taurus, which is, I think goes till about 2025, 2026, we're going to see this kind of, this continue to see this very hard to find really any stability. So that's one factor. For crypto, I mean, let's see what happens in March and April. I do think 2023 overall would be better than 2022. I do think there will, I especially like the period of like May and June for crypto in 2023. And then again, I think at the end of the year, things start to look really good as we go into 2024. Now, the halving cycle, of course, is in 2024, and that's traditionally driven bull markets in crypto. Now, hopefully some of this macro risk stuff starts to resolve by 2024, right? Inflation should be coming down by then. The Fed should be starting to pivot by 2024. We should be having more easy money, and I mean, let's just say crypto and stocks were down all through 2023, which I don't think would be the case. 2024, I think, is when we're going to start to see a turnaround to more prosperity in bull markets again, based on both macro risk and the fundamentals of the crypto markets. And that lines up astrologically with a couple of things that I'm seeing as well. Basically, I'm still optimistic, for 2024. I think that crypto will recover from the collapse of FTX. I think crypto is bigger than any one guy, any one exchange. However, I do think that government regulation is going to change the market landscape. I think that we're going to be, it's going to be a new ball game post FTX. This is, I don't want to, it's like crypto will recover from this, but I also don't want to minimize the damage this has done in the short to midterm, because, there's just no new money is going to be coming into the space for the foreseeable future. People don't trust exchanges, and, crypto is a scam right now. I mean, people aren't going to be able to differentiate between crypto and what happened at FTX, right? I mean, of course, crypto insiders like ourselves, insiders, say, oh, well, Bitcoin is not a scam. Bitcoin, is crypto itself isn't the problem. It's bad actors like SBF and what they were doing. But I don't know that the general public is going to be able to make that distinction. And I don't think any institutional money is necessarily going to be coming into the space until we see a new, regulations. And it's going to just take time to recover from this. And that's assuming there's no other major catastrophe that happens. No other major exchanges go down. I mean, no other major bankruptcies affect the space. And that's definitely something we can't rule out until March and April. So, we got to be patient. I think the short term continues to be rough for the next 4 to 5 months, but I do think things get better. I was just joking around on Twitter today. I said, hey, enjoy this bear market. Maybe you get to spend some time with your family and friends and read a couple of books and go outside and do some fun things, because there will be a time to look for that next 100x, altcoin where you're just spending all day looking at technical charts and trying to find that next altcoin. Which one's gonna pop next? You remember that kind of feeling?
Yeah, I remember that well. Those are the days.
Altcoins, I mean, Bitcoin and Ethereum will definitely recover, and what new altcoins come out of the wreckage is hard to say. But 2024, guys, it's not that far away.
So it's ramen noodles for 2023, and then we might be back to steak and champagne for 24. I love it. Okay. And final question from me: Bitcoin new all-time high? Do you think it's on the cards, or do you think we've peaked?
Jesus, I'm more worried about a new all-time low, to be honest.
Oh no!
Let's rule that out of the picture first. I don't know if you guys want to look at some actual charts. Do you guys want to look at some actual, technical charts? I don't know, if that's something you want to look at. But, I think like the big question for me is whether, the kind of this zone between 10K and about 13.8, that's where I really want to see a hold, Yeah. Man, I got trolled so hard for months, right? People telling me the bottom was in, and I said, the big question isn't whether 17.5 is the bottom. It's whether we're going to see 10K hold. And so that's kind of what I'm looking at in the shorter term here over the next 4 or 5 months. I don't know if you saw Kathy Wood. She said yesterday that she's sticking to her $1 million by 2030 price call.
Yeah,
I don't really know.
Yeah, I'm
Kathy Wood, but
same.
I do question her predictions at times.
It's
more like the date, like give the prediction, but don't say when it's going to happen. I love her commitment. I love her thesis. I love her outlook. I like listening to her. I think she's brilliant, but they could be in quite a bit of trouble, right?
Well, her reputation is a bit tarnished these days. So we'll see what happens. Yeah. But things can change. Things can change and turn around. This is setback adoption, and we'll just have to see how, what happens, how this all goes down, what new regulations come out of this. And new all-time highs, I don't know. That people ask me that all the time. Like gold took like 10 years to come back and make a new all-time high. I'm not saying Bitcoin will do that, but sometimes it can take a long time, between gold, what was it, 2011, I think, maybe roughly speaking, and 2020, right? Yeah, that was like almost 9 years to come back and make new all-time highs. So it might be a while.
Yeah, I kind of feel the same. I think a lot of this latest rally was driven by the Fed's monetary policy. There was a lot of liquidity. There was a lot of leverage. Exchanges were pumping the price. It was kind of like the golden era for the crypto age. And I think when you kind of strip all of that away and you strip away some of these major exchanges that are providing liquidity, I think the next wave of the Bitcoin price action will be on the blockchain, and it will be pension funds, or it will need to be things like pension funds, and it will need to be corporations putting it on the balance sheet, and it will need to be just much more regulated. And I don't see that happening for a while. I think it's going to take some time before we get there. Yeah,
I mean, we have to see. I totally agree with what you just said exactly, and I'm in saying pretty much the same thing. I mean, we may not see. We just had like this 12-year or 11-year bull market from the end of the Great Recession, in 2009 till the end of the pandemic rally in 2021. That was about a 11, 12-year rally bull market. And I mean, now we have to see if there's going to be stagflation. Yeah. Maybe the Fed can't get inflation down.
They're going to change it to a 4% target, and they're going to just gaslight everybody. That seems
inflation
like
is great, guys. We need inflation. Yeah,
it's only 4%. It's been 10%. We've done an amazing job. Clap. Well done.
And inflation is good anyway, so be happy.
And we may not see a bull market like that again for a while. And so we may have to do with lower returns. Now, hey, Bitcoin's at 16,000 today. Last time I checked, maybe it's crashed, but we don't need it to go to the all-time high. Actually, like you could do a nice 2x from here would be fine by me.
Beautiful. Give me that.
30, 32, whatever, 48. Hey, I'll take 48 over 16.
I would take 48
right?
all day long.
So, and especially if it does go down to 13.8 or 10K, right? And then, it will probably go back up into the 30s, 40s, 50s at some point. So, if you time it relatively well, you could be looking at a 2 to 3x. It doesn't need to make a new all-time high for us to be happy again and to have some cash flow back from crypto trading. This has been an absolutely horrible year for just trading crypto too. I mean, it's been stuck in the flat periods for months, and this is going to be a rough period for a while. So buckle up,
We've been saying on the show that this year, and I think you and I actually spoke about this too, is just that 2022 has been a year for capital preservation. I think if you can come out of this year with, without taking massive losses across the board, then you've probably done quite well. And it's crazy to say that in this period of such high inflation that actually, to some degree, the safest place to be sat is cash.
There was no trade this year. Bonds got killed, right? Gold didn't do well. I mean, nothing really did well this year, except for that short summer rally, which was just a fake out. I do think, I like Jupiter and Taurus next year. Jupiter and Taurus also going to sextile Saturn. I was just looking at that historically. It's quite good for markets and the economy. So I do think there's some hope for next year to be a better year and more opportunities to trade. No, I'm not saying it's going to be great. I'm just saying it's going to be better than 2022. I think that, and also I just was actually reading an interesting article on Bloomberg today. They said, FTX, the collapse, these kind of huge frauds, they usually come out towards the end of the bust cycle. When liquidity is really at the low, starts to get really low, that's when the frauds get exposed, right? As long as the market, the scammers, they try to hold out and perpetuate the scam and get new investors to fill the gaps as long as they can until that money dries up. And that's usually towards the end of the bust cycle. So from that perspective, it's possible that this could be sort of like the heralding the end of the bust, the crypto bust. The only problem is that the AstroTA system is showing, in fact, that March and April, then that is my best guess for a bottom. The problem is that Saturn and Pluto still continue to do some bad things later in 2023, but they don't do them at the same time. In March, Saturn and Pluto simultaneously go in to destroy Bitcoin, essentially. And that's what I'm really worried about, March. And then you have the eclipse in April. So March and April, that would be my best guess for a bottom. And certainly, I've been around long enough to know that it is just a guess. But that would probably be a time where I would start, dollar cost averaging Bitcoin and Ethereum.
Well, how about we get you back on the show in March and then we can just see where we're at? I mean, it'd be so interesting.
Yeah, that would be awesome. Yeah, that would be great.
Yeah, I've enjoyed this conversation so much. It's been really fun. And it just gives us a different perspective on things. I personally, I'm not particularly a trader. I'm more of a long-term holder, and I really believe in Bitcoin as a Bitcoin standard, and I've become more of a Bitcoin maxi as the days goes on. Not the toxic type that thinks everything else is a shitcoin. But you know what? I do believe that it is a path. And what did Jeff Booth call it? A bridge to a brighter future. I really do believe that, and it's that's my thesis. Really, is just to buy little bits. But maybe I'm going to hold off on that after speaking to you and just see what March and April brings next year.
Well, dollar cost averaging as an investment strategy, right, is not about timing the markets. It is about just kind of that. And, I do think dollar cost averaging smaller amounts under 20,000 is probably okay. The larger allocations, I'd still be safe haven holding cash right now and just kind of waiting. Gotcha. And I agree with you. I'm a Bitcoin guy. I mean, I think Bitcoin is, it's the first one world currency of the internet. It brings people, transcends national borders and boundaries, national currencies and central banks, corporate control, banker control. It brings people together from all over the world like we are today, right? And I believe in the promise of Bitcoin. And I think our faith in Bitcoin is going to be tested in March and April. So it's going to be interesting. It's the first time I've actually really been worried. Like the Bitcoin natal chart, just before we go, I'll just say one really quick thing about the Bitcoin natal chart. The inception chart, it's actually quite an it's one of the most interesting charts I've ever seen. And it's one of the reasons I became a hardcore Bitcoin believer, because when I saw it, I said, oh my God, this is the Terminator. You remember the movie, Arnold Schwarzenegger movie from the 80s, right? He was like, it absolutely cannot be stopped. It's like, that's Bitcoin. Like, it's extremely hard to stop it. It has a furious tenacity and an incredible competitive desire to take over global finance. So I don't know that it can be killed or stopped, but we are going to see it being tested, I think, in March and April. And I've been saying this for months. Given the collapse of FTX, I think we have a better idea of the landscape we're dealing with now, which is kind of a wrecked ecosystem and a really slumping sentiment. And that's going to take at least 6 months for that to repair, And then now we've got the government regulators to worry about now too. So I hope Bitcoin survives. I think it does. I think it comes back bigger and better than ever, like it always has. But I'd love to come back in March and April and see, where we're at. That's the thing about predictions.
Yeah. Well, we can all come back and cry together at the state of the crypto markets,
unless we've all opened short positions. Yeah. Thanks for joining us. I think we'll end it there. It's a great place to finish. We'll catch you in March 2023.
Well, thanks a lot for having me, guys. And if you like this kind of as financial astrology stuff, definitely check me out on Twitter. And I have a Patreon group. My website, if I could do a quick plug for that, is astrocryptoreport.com. And that has all of my subscription services, consultations, tutorials for astrology. Still doing a few private consults every month. And love to connect with people into astrology and Bitcoin.
We'll link all of that up in the show notes as well, so people can go and follow you and find you. That's great. Awesome. Thanks.
Thank you.
We hope you enjoyed this episode. It would mean the world to us if you could leave a review wherever you're listening. This really does help and allows other people to find us online. You can keep up to date with new releases of the podcast by subscribing and following us on Twitter or Instagram for the latest crypto-related news. Information provided by Cryptopulse via this podcast, website, social media channels, and any other medium does not constitute financial advice, investment recommendations, or any other type of advice whatsoever. The Cryptopulse team are not professional financial advisors. Trading and purchasing cryptocurrencies do carry risks, and anybody wishing to partake in such activities should seek professional advice.